Executive Secretary. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Al Ekblad. I'm the Executive Secretary of the Montana AFL-CIO. We are doing our first live stream on Facebook, and it's our honor to have Senator Tester with us to talk about the PRO Act, the American Rescue Plan, and President Biden's infrastructure plan. Senator, the PRO Act is critical to workers. It's critical to the labor movement. And I know you're aware of that. And I appreciate that you're signed on as one of the original co-sponsors. Labor law reform has died in the Senate, the first time in the 1970s, then again in the 90s, and then with the Free Choice Act in 2009. It's viewed as a worker rights bill, but in reality, it is the best instrument to build a middle class in this country and to give workers the ability to have a career path that allows them to support their families and have a respectable, decent place to work. I just want to really thank you for taking the time to be with us today and recognize that you and I have been able to work together for the last 10 years and build a relationship. And I just want to thank you with everybody on today for all of the work you've done and the things that you have done at the request of the labor movement at different times here in Montana. So without going any further into that, Senator, I'm going to ask, our format will be, there's a couple of questions that I'll ask, and then there are some folks, workers from around the state that have questions or comments that they want to share with you. So to kick it off, the first question I have is, the PRO Act is the biggest piece of pro-worker legislation in decades. What immediate benefits do you see the bill creating when passed?
Well, first of all, before I answer your question, Al, I just want to say what a pleasure it is to be on this call with you. I appreciate our relationship and our ability to be able to work together. For Montana's workers and for workers all over this country, it's critically important. And I just want to touch on one thing before I get to the question, and that is that I'm starting to feel like I'm getting old because I've been around here for a number of years, almost as long as you, Al, and I've watched the middle class continue to decline, and I've watched the unions decline pretty dramatically over the last 40 years in particular, and I can tell you, I think that's not good for the country. It's certainly not good for our working men and women, and I would just say that that's what the PRO Act's about, and that's why it's put up, and we're long past time to get something passed that helps the workers in this country. And I think that, to your question, Al, the PRO Act's going to address a number of issues that have plagued American workers for decades. It will immediately crack down on employers interfering with workers' decisions. And I think that the bill ultimately is going to put teeth behind recourse facing employers who infringe on workers' rights. And it'll make it easier for workers to bargain collectively and create transparency and employer-employee relationships. And I think that's all good. I think it's all positive. And I think it all empowers the working people and thereby empowers the middle class.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I believe that the enforcement authority of the National Labor Relations Board to actually go in and fine and penalize bad actors that won't negotiate is critical. And I know that some other folks will talk about that later. So I guess my second question for you as a co-sponsor of the PRO Act, where do you see worker rights fitting into the larger economic programs that you'd like to see passed in this Congress?
Well, look, I think it's important, and I'm glad that President Biden included in this infrastructure package that he proposed just last week, and there's a reason for it. Because an investment in infrastructure requires an investment in our workforce, and I think that's just fundamental. That's fundamental to good jobs, and it's fundamental to to rebuilding our economy in this country.
I agree. There is so much in that infrastructure plan, the expansion of apprenticeship, the actual investment in road and bridge, in physical concrete infrastructure, bricks and mortar, but the human aspects of that plan of building housing and providing funding for training, I think changes the economic direction of our country. I mean, the fact that the president has worked closely with labor in putting this together, even before he was elected, I think, speaks well to the fact that it has to be a priority in this country. And, I'm hoping that we can find a path for that through the House and the Senate, and obviously the Senate with some of its rules is much more difficult. But, I can tell you that labor is going to show up. We're going to put pressure on the folks that say no to moving this legislation forward, and if the process won't let it move forward, then we're going to speak our piece and say that the process has to be changed. So I think our first commenter is somebody that I've. Go ahead.
In regards to that, because I think it's really important you make sure that your voices continue to be heard, whether it's in process or in actually the meat on this bill. Look, the president proposed this bill last week. We've been out for 12 days now. And I can tell you that some of the comments that I've heard from some folks on the other side of the aisle is that, the problem with this infrastructure bill is it's not all about infrastructure. Well, I'm here to tell you, to anybody who wants to listen, that infrastructure requires a well-trained workforce. And a well-trained workforce is infrastructure. And so you can say that isn't infrastructure, but you're lying to yourself if you do. A well-trained workforce is a part of the infrastructure in this nation. And we need to think of it that way. And so I just wanted to add that before we go any further. Thanks, Al.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. Just the investment in training and the potential investment in dislocated workers. We always talk about transition and dislocated workers as if it's a new issue, but those of us who have been around Montana watched, our mining and our smelting industries transition, our timber industries transition, and without federal assistance, what we are really forcing workers to do is try and, completely retrain themselves without any assistance. And I know that the American Jobs Plan has significant training dollars for dislocated workers as well as apprenticeship dollars. And we need to come up with some type of actual financial in their pocket support for workers when they're in transition or we're training them to new jobs, which is not going to happen. This is a point in our history where we can really make a difference if we're willing to step forward and make it happen. So our first question is going to come from Ty Wheeler. He's a young man, in my perspective and yours, Senator. He may not think so in his own, but that has tried to organize down at Yellowstone. He's a veteran, and has fought for our country, and he just he wants to talk about what his experience was down in Yellowstone.
Good afternoon, Senator. Thanks, Al. When you talk about economy, and Montana's got one of the best recreational economies in the world. I've fought fires, done other things as well. But when you look at the money that's coming in and where it's going, when we're guiding in Yellowstone, this last winter, myself, along with 5 of my colleagues, including among them NPS employees and park rangers, one of them who had spent 7 years dedicating his life to service, representing the national parks, were fired this last winter season for trying to organize a union in West Yellowstone. Time and energy to fight these labor movements in Montana is uniquely difficult due to many of the towns being located in remote locations And protesting in sub-zero temperatures has its added challenges. When workers were fired for exercising their First Amendment right to protest working conditions and wages trying to form a union, they were also forced to vacate company-owned housing in sub-zero temperatures, leaving many in a very precarious situation. I'm very thankful that we had a state representative protesting with us whenever the police showed up and told us could not protest in Montana and it was a right to work state and we should go home. I did not know my rights. I didn't even know what the NLRB was. So moving on, so Delaware North, the same company that trademarked the naming rights to Yosemite National Park, and they bought out the family-run company in the contract that I was previously working under, can gross over $80,000 per day on your access and my access when the winter guiding contracts, while paying less than $5,000 in direct overhead to its guides. My question to you is, how will the PRO Act ensure our right to freedom of speech is protected in the Montana workplace? And secondly, how will the PRO Act hold companies with billions of dollars and federal contracts who control the majority of the jobs in the area that they're held accountable for these violations?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for your service to this country and the military. Every one of us owe you a debt of gratitude for that. And I appreciate it very, very much personally. And I want to thank you for that. And what happened to you should never have happened to you. And in fact, the police came up and said you couldn't do this because we were right to work state. That's particularly bothersome also. So there's a lot of wrongs been done on a lot of different levels here. But the fact is, if we can get this PRO Act passed, it's going to roll back laws that have eroded workers' rights to organize. And it'll finally empower the NLRB, and Al talked about this, to take meaningful action when employers retaliate against workers exercising their rights, fundamental rights of free speech. Okay? Companies that retaliate against organizing workers, they'll actually be penalized. It's just not a slap on the wrist. It'll be a penalty. And the PRO Act also empowers workers to form and join unions if they want to without fear of what their employer is going to do. So the bottom line is that, I think forming unions are fundamental to what this country is about. As I said in my beginning, it's about what's really built the middle class in this country. And I think we've seen a middle class decline because we've seen the ability of unions to be able to do their job because of laws that have impeded on their ability to do their job. So moving forward, I just think it's really important that we get this PRO Act passed to be able to stop the kind of garbage that happened to you.
Thank you, Senator.
Somebody probably needs
Thank you.
to, it sounds like.
So I think he was working out of a coffee shop. So he's we might have had a little background noise there. And I mean, John, I was thinking as Ty was talking about the situation they went through, the situation that, the workers in Three Forks went through and the number of times you came down there after they had been locked out by Imerus. I think that was eye-opening probably for you and your staff. It was even eye-opening for some of us in the labor movement that hadn't seen a lockout in 25 years. They were flat out trying to take those rights to collective bargaining away from those 35 workers down there in Three Forks. And I want to tell you that everybody that was there with you appreciated it when you showed up and said they needed to go back to the table. And the fact that you came out with a statement saying that within 12 hours of when the lockout took place, I mean, that's the kind of support we need, and we need your strong voice with some of your colleagues in the Senate, trying to get them to understand the situations that workers in this country really face. So our next person with a question probably doesn't need any introduction to you, Senator, but it's Vicki Bird. She's the CEO of the Montana Nurses Association. She has also spent her life as a working nurse, and she is an AFL-CIO board member. So thank you for joining us, Vicki.
Thank you, Al, and good to see you, Senator Tester. My question to you is, and of course, thank you for your advocacy always for Montana nurses. We We brag about that often. But Montana nurses, along with other essential frontline workers, have gone above and beyond this past year, especially in the middle of this pandemic, putting their own health and safety on the line to keep Montana citizens and really everyone across our country, as healthy and as safe as we can. And in that time, we've also seen some light shined on some of the hazards and challenges that these essential jobs have brought forward, especially for our nurses across the state that continue to fight for better working conditions, safe working conditions, and proper staffing levels so that we can better take care of, have better quality care for our patients. How does a PROACT help maybe address some of these challenges?
Well, that's a great question, Vicki. Before I get the answer, I just want to express my appreciation for you and everything that you've done for our frontline workers, for our nurses in this state. You guys have been through a tough time. This last year has been an incredible challenge to all of you, and your exposure has been incredible. And I'm talking your exposure to the pandemic. And we need to say thank you to you and the people that you represent, because you're called essential workers for a reason, and that's because you're essential. You're frontline. You're the folks who keep this country safe, and you need to have your voices be able to be heard in the workplace. That if the pandemic's done some things that are really difficult to work with, but it has shown that your voices and the ability to have your voices out there are just absolutely critical all the time, but especially this last year. And I would say that the first step to winning the safe conditions needed to give the best care is making sure that the nurses and the frontline workers can negotiate on an even playing field, to negotiate for those safe working conditions. And the PROACT's going to ensure that workers can reach a first contract quickly, and it'll prevent employees from dragging out the process and ignoring workers' needs. Look, I can tell you that as somebody who had to do a fair bit of flying over the last year, I was very, very nervous about the exposure to COVID-19. Your guys' exposure, I'm talking about the nurses of this state, the frontline workers of this state's exposure to COVID-19 was probably 100-fold greater than mine. And I was really nervous about it. So you guys, your voice is really important, and your ability to negotiate on an even playing field is really, really, really important. And dragging out the process does not help frontline workers, and ignoring their needs does not help workers, period, especially frontline workers. So the PROACT will, I think, will address many of those challenges. So thanks, Vicki.
Thank you.
James, could you bring Vicki back up for just a minute? I want to ask her a question.
Okay.
Vicki, could, I know you kind of briefly referred to it, but can you talk about the importance of staffing levels and patient care ratios that you guys are able to negotiate when you have a contract versus hospitals, what the nurses face in hospitals that do not have collective bargaining?
Yeah, thanks, Al, for the question. And I'll try to be really, really brief. How we look at it is because of the facilities, and we have 30 across the state, and we're really proud of that. And we want all those facilities to be successful. And what we've negotiated in a majority of our contracts is the ability to sit down with management and talk about these staffing levels or ratios or patient to nurse or healthcare worker amounts, because just ratios doesn't fix it. But when you have nurses at the table and they become part of that conversation, then they can all agree upon, all have buy-in and keep higher quality of care. It's directly correlated. The more nurses you have at the bedside, the higher quality care you have. It's non-debatable. It's in all the literature. And so we appreciate those facilities that sit down at the table with those frontline nurses and figure out what staffing program works best for them. Thanks for the question, Al.
Thank you. Thank you. And I just know how important that is. Senator, were you going to say something? I'm sorry I jumped in.
Well, I mean, look, I'm one of the people that is a consumer of the services that those nurses give, and I don't like it when I have to be a consumer. But evidently, things happen. You get in a fight with a meat grinder or something, and you're there. And I'm going to tell you, the last thing you need is some nurse that is running ragged and is just totally wore out, because not only is she feeling guilty about her lack of ability to do her job, but the patients aren't getting what they need either, because you've got an overstressed workforce. And so those are the kind of things that are just, oftentimes we take it for granted, but those things don't happen by accident. They happen because folks like Vicki Bird can step up and negotiate common sense contracts, and it's really important.
Thank you.
Thank you. So our next question is going to come from James Holbrook. James is the business manager for IBEW Local 206 and also an AFL-CIO board member. And James has joined us, so thank you.
Thanks, Al. Hi, Senator. As a prior military service member myself, I want to just say thank you for all you do on behalf of all veterans around the states. I've seen you stand up time and time again on our behalf, and I appreciate it. My question is about veterans and how they're, when they're discharged, they're particularly vulnerable to precarious employment, and they're more likely to join a union than non-veterans. How do you see the PRO Act empowering veterans in the workforce?
Well, thanks for the question, James. I will tell you, I think it's important. There are more than 1 million veteran workers that are union members out there, and I don't need to tell you, but as well as do your fellow veterans, that transitioning from the military service to the private sector is difficult, and unions help veterans navigate this transition to set themselves up for long-term success with good careers that offer good wages. And I could get into what folks aren't doing right within the military before people are discharged, and what the VA needs to do better after folks are discharged. But the truth is that the unions step up and they provide stability in this transition that is critical, and safe and reliable work is really a key element of all this. We make civilians into warriors, and we do a hell of a job at it. And they go out and they go all across the world, and they do things that none of us even would dream of doing. They sacrifice, their families sacrifice. And then when they get out of the military, we are not doing the kind of job that we should be doing. And training and getting a job is really important about that. And creating that stability is really important. And I can tell you unequivocally that unions play a critically important role in that transition. And I want to thank you for that, because it's folks like you, James, that actually help make that happen. But this PRO Act is going to help empower veterans in the workforce. And that's a win-win all the way around.
Thank you.
Yeah. Some of the things that we're looking at, in our current economy is, veterans coming into the workforce, they're, fully a third of them are making less than about $31,000 a year. That has a lot to do with right to work states. And even veterans that are in the construction industry, 30 or 40%, almost 40% of them, make less than $20 an hour and don't have benefits. And those are situations that are corrected through collective bargaining. And, our unions here in Montana, when people get to the point where they can't do their craft anymore, they have an actual pension they can live on, and they have that retirement, and they have health care. And so it is extremely critical to veterans, because especially in a state like Montana, where I think we have the highest percentage of our population that serve of any place in the country. I think you said you were second, but I knew we were in the top two.
I was trying to read your mind out. We do have one of the highest percentages to serve, and we have second highest per capita number of veterans that live in our state. So you're right.
Yeah.
As always, you're right, Al.
So, yeah. Can you write that down and send it to Carla for me? So I think we also have Sean White, who's the training director for the Montana Operating Engineers, on with us, and I know he wants to talk about what's going on with the infrastructure bill and the opportunity to train apprentices.
There we go. Can you hear me now? All right, excellent. Good afternoon, Senator Tester, Al. So my question is, President Biden's infrastructure plan calls for a $100 million investment in job training in high demand sectors like manufacturing, caregiving, clean energy, with the expansion of apprenticeship slots between 1 and 2 million people. So how do you think that we can ensure that this training provides workers with a true path to economic security instead of just being having the money just dumped into employers' pockets?
Well, I mean, look, I think it's about empowering unions when it comes to job training. I really do, and I think that that's exactly what President Biden has in mind. Take it from every step you can. I can tell you that if we get this infrastructure bill passed, businesses are going to do just fine, but they're going to need a well-trained workforce. And I can tell you that in my experience, both through the state legislature and then back in the United States Senate, the folks who do an incredibly good job, and there's facilities around the country, and Montana has its share too, of union-based facilities that teach their members how to do a job it's stellar. And I think being able to use these dollars for that workforce training is just really, really, it's good business. It's good for business, and it's good business for the country. And so I would just say that, this is, we talk about infrastructure every congressional session, and every administration's talked about doing an infrastructure bill. And the fact is, we're living off of infrastructure that was built by my parents' and grandparents' generation. We're long overdue for an infrastructure bill. And I will tell you that this bill is significant. It will make a difference in our infrastructure, in all areas of our infrastructure. But you aren't going to do a well-trained workforce. If you don't have a well-trained workforce out there, it's not going to work. President Biden knows that. You guys know that. I think businesses know that. And so let's go to the folks who know how to train people. And I think that's the folks with the AFL-CIO, quite frankly. You do a great job. Look, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about our trade schools and our community colleges. They do a good job too. So let's empower the folks that are out there, the training folks, to get things done. And then I think you're going to see this country take off. I think you're going to see the middle class take off. I think you're going to see us remain a leader in the world. And when you have countries like China in particular, that is putting so much money in infrastructure, and we've got a bunch of folks in Washington, D.C. that are sitting back saying, we can't afford to do this. What I have to say to them is, we can't afford not to do this. If we don't make this investment, do we expect it to happen by accident, or what's going on here? And so we need to make the investment. We need to empower unions for workforce development, and I think we can maintain our status as the greatest country in the world.
Okay,
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
So, the keys to training, I think, is that we make damn sure that the certifications are not up to to the employer. The certifications need to be done either at a federal level or in a state-approved certified apprenticeship program. And that's not just in our construction crafts, that's in manufacturing. We have a long history of apprenticeship in manufacturing in this country, but it disappeared when our industry was offshored. And when those programs come back, I mean, I think you need, worker, and in my mind, that is union participation in the design and operation of the training programs. And I think that, it's really important that the certification is from a source that provides value to the worker, not to the employer, so that it is transferable and they can carry it with them. I'm thinking of our former president's attempt to pass IRAPs, and now we have some guy that might have ran against you a few years ago, who's now in Congress wanting to bring him up again. I won't say his name, but I mean, that is a really, really bad idea, because all that is kind of, I think, going to what, Sean asked originally. It was dumping money in employers' pockets, saying you can have this money and you can say you train these workers. But we really need a third party that is the accreditation. And I think that should be the federal government or state approved and accredited apprenticeship programs, John. So, I can't hardly believe this, because James said that this would be 30 minutes. And I couldn't hardly believe that we'd get it done in that time, but we're pretty close. I mean, I think the PRO Act is the key to the American dream, John. And I hope you share that with us. I really appreciate you being with us today. The income inequality in this country has gone up and down almost in direct correlation to union membership, and this is a real chance for our country to give workers rights and the ability to address that inequality. So, we're close to our time where we can wrap up. Do you have any last comments you want to share with us?
Well, yeah, of course I do, Al. I mean, for sure. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this town hall. I just want to say that this is the greatest country in the world. It didn't get that way by a bunch of people sitting on their hands. It got that way because this country was built, and it was built in large part by union labor. And if we don't recognize that moving forward, and I'm talking about we being the policymakers in Washington, D.C., and the policymakers in Helena too, as far as that goes, then you can't expect this country to remain the greatest country in the world. It takes work, it takes vision, it takes investment in the right places. And Al is 100% correct, and everybody on this call knows this. If you take a look at the decline in the middle class and the decline in unions, they are parallel lines. So let's get those lines heading in the right direction. And that is, let's start rebuilding that middle class. And you start rebuilding that middle class by empowering unions to once again to be able to fight for their workers, for safe wages, good benefits, and safe working conditions. So good wages, good benefits, and safe working conditions. And I think this PRO Act goes a long ways towards that. And I agree with you, Al. Look, as a U.S. Senator from Montana, I'm going to get some pushback from some folks on this. But the bottom line is that this country overall, and keeping this country the greatest country in the world, is what's important to me. And that's also what's important to the unions, the AFL-CIO. And it's, I think, what the basis of this PRO Act is about. So I just want to say, Al, thank you very much. It is indeed always a pleasure to share the cameras with one Al Ekblad. He's dropped a lot of weight, so I can't wear his clothes anymore. But it's always a pleasure to see him on the big screen.
So, well, I think that there's, I can remember when I got elected and they referred to me being brought in from the East as big labor. And I never knew for sure if it was about my size or from where I was from. But, I think the reference to big screens for both of us works still. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate this. I hope we're able to do it again in the near future. We are going to be doing everything as a labor movement here in Montana and across the country to, put pressure on people to pass the PRO Act. And as I'm sure you're aware, you'll hear from us, both thanking you for all of the support we've had and encouraging you on anything that we think we can get your help from on other subjects as well. So thank you again, Senator. It was a privilege to have you with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Take care. Thanks, everyone.